Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie, and I'm a member of the TIFF Next Wave Committee, the team that programs this incredible festival for all of you. On behalf of TIFF Next Wave Film Festival, I'd like to welcome you to today's screening of Socrates, directed by Alexandre Moratto. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that tonight's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community. Thank you to our lead sponsor, Bell, and to our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oréal Paris, and Visa. Thanks also to our major public supporters, the City of Toronto and the Ontario Arts Council, for their ongoing support. The TIFF Next Wave Committee is supported by the Slate Family Foundation Learning Fund. And of course, thank you to our members and donors for their generous contributions to TIFF and to those who support TIFF's learning programs year-round. We would also like to thank our programming partner for this screening, Inside Out. If you're wondering how to get up on the stage too, TIFF is recruiting new members for the 2019-2020 TIFF Next Wave Committee, a group of 12 high school students like myself who love film and plan events like this festival and get to tag films in the September festival too. Applications are due in May and will be available online at tiff.net/nextwave in the weeks following the festival. I'm really excited to introduce this film to you today, one of the most emotionally impactful films I've seen all year. This story is made by youth for youth, and that love and understanding and connection shines through in every scene. Finally, we are so lucky to have the director of Socrates here with us today. He will be back after the film for a Q&A, but first, please join me in welcoming him to the stage to say a few words, Alexandre Moratto.
Thank you so much. Very thoughtful introduction. Thank you so much for having our film here, for having me here. This is a film that's very special to me. As you mentioned, it was produced by a crew of 16 to 20-year-olds from the local low-income communities in Brazil. And they're part of a UNICEF-supported project that helps youth find a balance in their lives, to find a way to become professional, to pursue an education, and it's all done through work on film sets. So the entire crew was these young people from these communities, and many of them are from the neighborhoods that we shot the film in, including Taina Mantesu, who was 18 years old at the time, and they called her on to be my assistant. And one day I saw her writing, and I was just so amazed by her incredible talent. And eventually she came on board and co-wrote the script with me. And so I'm very proud that not only is this a film that was made with the crew being from the places that it represents, but also the co-writer. So I feel like the story is very much something that's authentic to the experience of growing up in these neighborhoods. So I'm very proud of that. I'm also very proud of our lead actor, all of the cast, and especially Christian Malheiros and Thales Ordakiji, who play the two leads. And Christian Malheiros, he's now nominated for this film. It's his first time acting. He's nominated for the Best Actor Award at the Independent Spirit Awards, and he's competing with Joaquin Phoenix and Ethan Hawke. So it's just really, really great that this small film that we made with a budget of $20,000, that was our entire budget to film this movie, is getting this recognition. So thanks again. I hope you enjoy the screening, and I'll be very happy to come and answer all of your questions afterward. So have a great session. Thank you.
And we are very lucky to have the director of Socrates here with us today for a short Q&A. We have 2 volunteers in the audience running around with mics. Please just raise your hand as high as you can, and we'll try to get to all of you. But first, please join me in welcoming back to the stage Alex Moratto.
Thank you.
So to start off this Q&A, I have a question. I was wondering, I think this is a really beautiful film and a really beautiful story.
Thank you.
And I was wondering what drew you to telling Socrates' story.
my mother passed away, and it was I was very close to my mother, and it was a moment in my life where I had a lot of grief, and I was going through a lot of anxiety, and it was just very difficult for me. And so I had all of these emotions that I needed to somehow express and get out there, except I couldn't really find how I was going to do that. And when I was 19 years old, I volunteered at the Instituto Quero, which is the UNICEF-supported institute that I produced the film with. And I was, as a volunteer, working with people my age, from a totally different social background, socioeconomic background. And I became friends with them, and we stayed in touch over the years. It was one of the formative experiences of my, younger life. And I just, after my mom died, I moved back to Brazil. I needed to spend some time with family, so I was with my mother's family, and I started to go back and meet up with the people who I'd been friends with at the time. And then I started spending time in the communities again and asking questions, and that's how ideas started to come about. And then finally I found a way to express everything that I was feeling through a story that represents the people that I really wanted to represent. I wanted to tell a story and to give a stage and a voice to these young people from these communities and from this institute. So I had so much inside me that I wrote the first draft in a week. It just all came out very quickly. Then I took that, I presented it to the institute. They loved it. I told them, I said, if we do this, I want to do it like we did it when I was a volunteer, which is the kids actually produced the film, and we guide them and help them. And so they brought on some graduates of the program who had gone on to become professionals. And so it was me and a team of these graduates leading this group of young people to make the film. So that's how the idea and the project came about.
Wow. And I mean, I really love that you brought it back to the institution and brought it back to the program, and just kind of like, I think, paying it forward, and really kind of being a creator in a community where you were previously learning from. And how was it collaborating with so many young people?
Oh, it was, it was a rich collaboration. I loved working with Tainan Mantea, so the co-writer. I had written the first draft, and we just had this really exciting time sitting in the office working on the script and then going to locations. I loved working with the cast, and I loved on the set working with young people who have so much energy and this desire to learn. And so for me, it was a first too as an educator. I'd been a volunteer, but I'd never been an educator. So it was also a crash course in teaching for me, in the same way that it was a crash course in filmmaking for them. So I remember it being a very lively, very intense set where we had these tremendously difficult scenes we had to do in extremely difficult locations. I mean, for instance, just to get that one opening shot of him with the mother dying, that was a morning for us, because what would happen, we'd make noise and then neighbors would come and want to know what was going on. So we very much shot it in the communities that you're seeing, and so of course with that, without closing down a neighborhood, there's all sorts of challenges. So we had to work very nimbly as a crew, and everybody had to be communicating constantly to get it done.
I really think that energy and that empathy really spoke to me through this film.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Up in the middle at the top.
Yeah, congratulations. Thanks for bringing such a beautiful story.
Thank you.
I'm just curious. Thank you. I'm just curious about the reference to the soccer, because she mentioned something about the soccer team in Brazil. And I'm just curious about what was the reference with the soccer player?
Yeah, that's a great question. Socrates was a very famous Brazilian soccer player, and I knew that this character had to have a very strong name, because he's such a I mean, the whole film, if you notice, is basically a portrait of a boy. We wanted him to be an anchor for the camera, so the camera's either following him or it's in front of him, and it moves with him, so it's almost like he's an anchor for the camera. So if you're going to make a film where it's all just on one person, you want them to have a strong name that people can remember. And when I first wrote the script, before Tainá got involved, he was called Ayrton because there's a famous race car driver from Brazil called Ayrton Senna. There's a great film called Senna about him, the same director who did the Amy Winehouse documentary. Great film. Anyway, I called it Ayrton, and it was difficult for international audiences to catch on, and then I would mention it to friends of mine. I'd say, oh, it's Ayrton. They couldn't really pronounce it right. And then I was driving in São Paulo with my aunt, and we came to an intersection, and all of a sudden this guy starts running across the street, and we had to stop very quickly to not hit him. And we're like, oops, sorry. And he was like, oh, it's okay. And then we look, it was Hai, who's the brother of Socrates, the Brazilian soccer player. And I was like, that is actually Hai. It was really him. And then I said, Socrates, that's a better name. So I went home and I changed it as soon as we got home.
A unique origin story.
Yeah.
Can we have in the middle on the left right there?
Oh, I can just, so I was curious about thank you. I was curious about the process of collaboration between you and these young artists. I was wondering if this might be a bit of a big question, so maybe if there's just a few examples you can give, but I was curious if you can think of particular moments between you submitting your initial script and then the perspectives that some of these young people brought to it that maybe you hadn't seen initially in the story, but that ultimately stayed with the story to this, what we saw just now. Like if you can give, I don't know.
Oh, tremendous amount of change. And I think that's a really great question. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. I just got excited because it's a great question. So, I mean, just the first thing that started changing was the dialogue. Because I don't know how many people here speak Portuguese, but the gíria,
slang.
Thank you. The slang is so different, and so I wanted it to be very authentic to young people, and authentic regionally to where we were, which is in Santos, which is about an hour and a half from São Paulo. It's the beach and the port city, and so we had to really work with them on the dialogue. That was the first thing. I mean, and then in terms of big picture questions about the script and the story and the crux of the story, I think from the get-go, everybody was on board with that and agreed with that and felt that that was strong. I think overall, you know, the dialogue, other things, just little details like the scene where he mentions Socrates, like she says he's filling out an application for a job and she says, quem era corintiano, who was part of this, who rooted for this team that Socrates was a player for, your mom or your dad? Like, those are details that the kids came up with and that Tainá came up with. And we would do these workshops settings where we would, as the script was evolving with me and Tainá, we would present it again to our the people on the crew, and we would do a workshop setting, and then we'd discuss scenes and we'd discuss ideas in it. And a big change, actually, this one was really strong, was I mean, I've always known homophobia is still prevalent in Brazil and in many countries, but I actually didn't realize, because my family's from São Paulo, and you know, it's a big city, a very cultural city. In Santos, the situation's a little bit more different. It's more conservative, and it's not as big of a city in that sense. And so I had no idea homophobia was still so bad there. Like, we added scenes, like the scene on the beach. Like, Tainá was like, no, if they kissed on the beach, they'd get beaten up. Like, it doesn't exist. Like, it's just very bad here. It's really, really difficult. So, and we had a lot of gay people on our crew too, and so everybody agreed we had to make it more authentic to being gay in these communities.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful question. Thank you. Can we get in the middle, I think third row from the back?
I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for the film. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask, I mean, so you said that it was shot within the community. So how did you go about picking the cast? Were they also from the communities as well?
Yes, as a matter of fact, most of our cast is... Christian is from a neighborhood very close to where we shot. Christian Malheiros, who plays the lead. Thales is more from the downtown area. And the supporting cast of people around is a mix of non-actors. Like I think the guy who plays the shop owner is actually a shop owner. But for instance, the woman who plays the social worker, who I think she did such a great job. She's a trained actress. The one of the women who does the shop scene where she gives him the change, the 25 cents or whatever. She's a big telenovela actress. So it was just a mixture of cast but one rule that we did set is everybody's going to be from this region because we want to support this region through the film. So the whole cast is from there. A couple people who came from São Paulo, they were from there originally. So it was very much a film with a cast from there. And how did we find? Well, that was actually back to your question. It was very tough because it was Taina at one point apparently had a knife drawn on her because how dare you present the idea of doing a film where two men would kiss, you know? And so that was a very difficult thing to find actors who were, or anybody of this age range who'd be willing to kiss. Thankfully, we got very lucky with Christian and Thales, who are trained actors from a very good theater school, just a wonderful theater school. So they had a lot of training and they were able to bring that to the performance. But we auditioned, I think, 1,000 kids for the role of Socrates. And I learned early on, I said, you know what, I'm just going to be transparent about everything. This is about a young gay man and there's a kiss with another man on the mouth. Is that okay with you or not? And that way I would just filter it out. And after auditioning 1,000 people, it was very evident that Christian and Thales were the right ones for the role. And we went to all the public schools and we did a mix of actors, non-actors, again, people with and without experience. Oh, and might I add, Christian is the lead now in a big Netflix series in Brazil. And Thales is doing a series for Universal, so we're hoping to see very good things from them.
Huh, good for them. Can we get the orange scarf right there?
Hi. First of all, that was a really great movie. I'm from Brazil.
Thank you.
I actually grew up in Santos, so it was really awesome seeing that.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I didn't know that it was there, and then I was like, what? That's crazy.
Santos and São Vicente.
Yeah,
which is nearby.
I recognized all
Yeah.
the areas. Like, I only grew up there until I was 5. My dad, his whole childhood was there. So that was really cool. When was this filmed in Brazil? Because I noticed that you had government funding, and the institute that you were talking about also is government funded, and I'm just like weary of what's gonna happen to that kind of stuff now. And if you think that if you were to try and film this now, do you think that the current government would even fund it or allow it, just based on the values that the president has and the values that are represented in this movie?
That's a good question. The straight up answer is I just don't know. Like I left Brazil in December. He's in office as of January. I'm going back in March. So I've been a little disconnected. I've had all these commitments in North America, so I've been here. And I think time will tell. As far as I'm aware, there's still public funding in Brazil. In terms of government funding, you'd mentioned, we did not get government funding for filming the movie. That was $20,000 in donations that I raised by calling everybody I know. And that wasn't a choice, that was a necessity. I couldn't find the funding any other way, so we did it that way. We did get very fortunate to have government funding from PROACI for our post-production, which really elevated the whole quality of the film. So I'm very thankful to that grant. That's a government grant from the state of São Paulo. It's not federal. So I'm probably not the best person to ask because I'm one of the few filmmakers who made their debut and didn't go through the government to get the movie funded to actually shoot it. So I'm less experienced when it comes to that. You should probably ask a filmmaker who went through that track from the beginning of their career. They'd probably be able to answer better because I don't know. Like, I just got the state funding for post, and that was after I had something to show for it. And they were great to work with.
The girl in the orange beanie over there.
Hi. Oi.
Oi.
Basically, one thing that really hit me in this movie is the open end of it. And I want to know from you, how do you think that open end, like, we don't know exactly what will happen next, or, like, the end, how do you think that represents that community in Brazil?
That's a great question. So I had written in the end, in the script, that he would go off, and the original draft is him asking for a job again and going back to looking for work, and it ended on him looking at a attendant and saying, "Are you hiring?" And then it ends. And we just felt that that wasn't the right ending for the film, and that the emotional story is about this boy and the loss of his mother and those ashes. So we chose to end it on the beach. And in fact, I used the footage that we shot for the original ending in another scene when he's off looking for work, because you use everything you have at your disposal when you're making a film. And so we just felt it was better to leave it open-ended in that sense. And the big reason for doing that is I would hope when it's open-ended like that, everybody can bring their own meaning and their own truth to the film. And to me, it's a very hopeful ending because he's chosen to live. He could let those waves take over and he could not get out of the water. But he chooses to get out of the water and to stand up and to let go of his mother and to keep going. So for me, it's very hopeful. Other people have come up to me and have said they think it's just devastating ending, that it's terribly sad. They don't think there's any hope for him, and they think it represents a generation of young people who don't have any hope. That's not the way I see it, but if people see it that way, they're certainly welcome to. I wanted people to have their own take on it and their own opinion on it. I, of course, see a lot of hope. I see hope in the young people who made the film, who are wonderful people and who want nothing more than to have a decent life and to represent their community and to help their families. So for me, I see a lot of hope in that, and I see it in the young people and in the actors who I made the film with.
We have time for one more question. The girl in the middle in the red long sleeve shirt. That's you? Yep.
By the way, may I just interrupt? If there are any unanswered questions, I'll hang around here a little bit and you can come talk to me and I'll answer them personally. So just to let you know.
Great. Thank you once again for the beautiful film. I'm
Thank
also
you.
from Brazil. I grew up in São Paulo and lived there for a bit as well. I was just wondering, in terms of how important was it to you to encapsulate sort of the landscapes of Santos as well as São Paulo, and did you have any idea that this film would sort of be reaching international audiences as well?
In terms of the landscape, I think it's a character in the film and it was very important, but at the same time that it's a character, for the most part, I wanted it to be revealed around his face in soft focus, so it's like it's there, but rarely do we actually point the camera straight at a location and say, this is where we are. There's a couple shots that I thought were too good to pass up on that I wanted to show, or perhaps I needed them for transition, but in general, I wanted it to be on his face or behind his back, and you would just get a sense of where he was, and the texture would be all around him. But I mean, that was everything to me. I mean, we put a lot of, the two big things we put most of our attention on were finding the right cast and finding the right locations. And the locations team did such a good job, because they would actually go out, they would take pictures of all of these locations, they'd bring it to me, we'd pick a couple finalists, and then I'd go and look at them personally, because, you know, I have to decide if it works, if I can, where I'm gonna put the actors. And it was, you know, handpicked by people who know these places so well. So that was really great, that I would say, oh, I'm interested in something like this, and people would think, and they'd be like, maybe here, and then they'd go off and take the pictures. So absolutely, very important for the film are the locations and all of that, because it puts us in that reality. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question? Oh, international audiences. Well, of course, we're very thrilled and excited and feel very fortunate to be having I think we're at our like 20th festival. You don't expect that to happen when you make a film. We made it not because we wanted to get into into so many great festivals. We did it because we wanted to make this film and to represent. And so now that it is doing that and it's reaching people internationally, of course, we're very, very happy and very proud. And now we'll be releasing in Brazil. I'm very excited. This just happened. A director called Fernando Meirelles, who directed a wonderful film called City of God. His company is handling our distribution, and from now on it will be from executive producer Fernando Meirelles. So of course we're very excited about that, and I've always looked up to him as a filmmaker. And we'll see about a North American distribution. I think we have a couple of things that might be coming up. So fingers crossed, and thanks for your question.
I mean, thank you again for coming to this festival. It's been a pleasure having you. I'm really excited to see where your film goes next. We are going to actually be continuing this discussion. If you're interested, there are volunteer docents, and they will be hosting an informal talk in the Founders Lounge. So that's on the second floor, so one floor below us, from 4:45 to 5:45 p.m. And really thank you for coming out, and thank you for having this discussion with us, and it's been great. So please join me again in thanking Alex Moratto.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you to TIFF and Inside Out, right? Thank you very much for having us here.